All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I know it's towards the end of the day, and that can be sort of low energy. Luckily, they have some treats out there. So just to sort of lay this out, by the way, there's plenty of room at the table if you like. Feel free, don't be shy. It's sort of I've never presented at a conference table before, so it's okay. It's fine. It's kind of nice. I can sit down. So my name is Eric Reardon, and I'm the Vice President for Business Development at Care2. I've been at Care2 for almost 12 years, and before that I was a customer for about 6 years. Care2 is 2 weeks older than Google, little known fact. Another little known fact, so we're the world's largest social network for good in that we specifically develop this community of nearly 50 million people to do good, whereas, for instance, Google, their motto is don't be evil. Now, it turns out that there's like $600 billion gap between not being evil and actively being good. But we decided to take the pay cut and be good. So in the course of our work recruiting donor prospects for nonprofits, we send about 100 million emails a month, and therefore email deliverability is kind of a big deal for us. So after years of badgering, I convinced our CTO and CEO to write an updated book on the new rules of email deliverability, because a lot has changed. And so in your bag there is a postcard with, if you still have your bag or if you have the papers that were in it, there's a postcard with a link to the ebook, which is maybe worth referring to later. Your call. So we will get started. If I can click the arrow. All right, so these are two realities that sort of are the underpinning of everything that I'm going to say today, which is that there are some email addresses that are toxic. And more importantly for a lot of organizations, some emails that started out good are now toxic on your file. And we'll get to why. So these are the sort of underlying truths that we are operating under, and by embracing this reality, we may get rid of 100,000 emails off our list a month, but we maintain typically 98% in inbox delivery on Google. Microsoft is just a disaster, and forget it. Give up. It'll fluctuate depending on how much you email in any one day. Inbox anywhere from 20% to 80%. Nothing changing that we can tell other than the volume. So, all right. So, because of the fact that some emails are bad to begin with and some go bad, in order to ensure high rates of email deliverability, you need to have a clean list. You need to get rid of inactive addresses. You need to check your list for bad addresses, and then you need to prevent new toxic addresses from being added to your list. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. So the first challenge with email deliverability is there are people out there that enjoy seeding organizations' lists with spam traps to determine whether the organizations are behaving in a way that they think they should behave. So spam traps can get onto your list in a variety of ways. Very often, what they'll do is they'll use an intentionally typoed or faulty email address, and then that they know what they put in, and they can see if you mail them, even though you didn't get permission to mail them. There are a lot of other emails this can be done maliciously. This can also be done through address recycling, and this is to rule number 2 that we mentioned 2 slides ago, which is that some previously good emails can become bad emails. After 6 months, some email providers will recoup your address. If you haven't opened it, if you haven't used that email address, if you haven't logged in for 6 months, some of them will take it back, and in some cases use it as a spam trap to see, because at this point, they figure if you're emailing somebody that hasn't opened their email in more than 6 months, then you're not paying attention. You're not doing good. You're not focused on high engagement, etc. So this person obviously didn't want your email, and therefore they will penalize you. So stopping bad addresses is is first going through what's on your list and saying and we'll get into a bunch of examples here. But so address I will read this because I'm going to see if I can pronounce obfuscation. So they create bad domains, and dead decommissioned domains are a sign of a stale list. Sending email to a typo domain can lead to instant blacklisting. Temporary email domains are a sign the user does not plan to engage with your brand. So that's telling the email provider, that's telling Gmail, this isn't a good emailer. You are not good at sending email that people want, or they wouldn't have used a throwaway, a burner email. Role accounts have high complaint rates because you're emailing people in their job. And so if info@wherever.com is getting Care 2 action alerts, good chance that they don't actually want Care 2 action alerts. So these are all, you can see that there's sort of, some of them are a little bit subtle on these typos, some of them are pretty glaring. These are the sorts of things to look out for in terms of cleaning your list. Because if you don't, you can get blacklisted by outfits like Spamhaus, which can crush your inbox deliverability. And they are a black box to a large extent in terms of who they penalize and how they penalize, but they sure like to penalize. And then you can pay them $10,000 a month to keep your list deliverable. And it sounds like a protection racket to me, but I don't know.
You don't know if you've been blacklisted by them?
Oh, you'll know.
So how do you know?
They don't tell you why. You'll know because if you're any sort of your analytics, like nothing is getting delivered. So Google Analytics is saying, we sent an email blast and we got a 1% open rate. That's not a good sign. But where they're a bit of a black box is where they're not super transparent about how what's triggering their decisions. What they want is a world where everything is instead of a pre-checked box, it's an opted-in, a checked box, an unchecked box that people check. And what they really, really, really like is a double opt-in, which is that you check and then later you confirm, yes, I still want to be on this list, which would give you a very pristine and very, very small list. And sort of, and I'll get to it a little bit later, but it sort of assumes that humans are really stupid and really need to be told, are you sure you want to do this? So we want to avoid this graph. Everybody does, of course. So these are ones that you want to unsubscribe immediately. And we see no spam at gmail.com and that sort of thing all the time. And so dead email domains, these domains no longer exist, mci.net, so there's a good chance that people on that email account haven't opened in a long time. Our rule of thumb on sort of activity levels and when we drop somebody from our list is if they're inactive for more than 6 months. It used to be longer, and it's sort of a war of attrition, or it's an arms race. The more challenging the email providers get, the more rigorous we have to get. And this is, it's not the email game is not what it was 5 years ago. A lot has changed, and it's a lot harder. So cleaning up the list that your existing list, step one. Step two, this is one of many tools out there that are a really good tool to prevent bad emails from getting added to your list. So if somebody types in, if they misspell Hotmail or Gmail or whatever, it will say, did you mean actual Gmail or Hotmail? It's just a really good way to at least get the accidental ones, because accidental ones can't be delivered, but email providers are like, what is this? Why are these being sent if these people actually wanted to get email? And this screenshot is in the email deliverability ebook as well. So, and I can also email this to anybody that wants it. So we mentioned this, so I won't spend too much time on it. But these are the other categories of emails that you might want to look up in your list to see if they exist: role accounts and disposable addresses. 10-minute mail, 10-minute email. So this is harder than it looks. Obviously, you're all sitting there picturing like, how am I going to look up mci.net and every other dead domain? And is there a list of all the dead domains out there? And how many dead domains are there? And then the role accounts, does that really matter? Is it? And maybe depending if you work for an association of customer support people, then everybody's at support at, leave them, keep them. Sometimes it's okay. So just a quick reminder of the fact that that some emails start out bad, some emails go bad, sort of like when people go to college. So this is a rule that we strongly adhere to, and it goes back to cutting people if they're inactive over 6 months. At the eCampaigns Forum in Oxford, England, several years ago, there was nearly a fist fight over whether you should get inactive email addresses off your list. Some people felt very strongly that you should, and some people felt very strongly that you shouldn't. And we feel very strongly that you should, but I'm not going to fight anyone about it. It's an opinion backed up by data, and I'm just going to leave it there. So the thing is, there is a tendency of, we all aspire to have a larger list. We all aspire to have people on our list for a long time, because it suggests that they like us. They really, really like us. And that's a good thing. Everybody wants that, right? But the thing is, that can cause people to say, well, I'm going to, they only open once a year, but they've been on since 1995, so they really like us. I'm not going, and they might give. This could be the next bequest, because they've got a really old email address, and if they're not really active, if they're not engaging, it doesn't matter how long they've been on your list, they're doing you more harm than good. There's a good chance. So now this was written by our CTO. I'll point out where an engineer really got specific on this in a moment. So this is just when it comes to email attrition. These are emails unsubscribing, right? That happens, and emails go bad, and so it's this process of and I'm sure in engaging networks there's a lot of automation that can be done that can just make sure that you no longer, and you have a segment of no action in 6 months. They don't get email. And you don't have to delete them. Just don't send them. So we already talked about some spam traps can be recycled and sent back to you that were previously good email addresses. That's probably the person that signed up in 1995, and the person opening, once a year is Spam House, just checking. So that's sort of the section on list hygiene, and now the next two sections we're going to sort of talk about engagement, but engagement from the view of an email provider, not engagement from the view of a creative person or a campaigner, or the sort of the artistic types like me. Ish. I don't do good art, but I'm more creative than technical. So one way to keep these email lists and these email addresses from becoming inactive, of course, is to give them reasons to be active, give them reasons to open. And so it's not about how pretty the picture is, but the size of the picture and the size of the eyes as a portion of the picture might matter, but more from a sort of a digital sense than from a creative sense, because this is what an email provider is looking at. They're looking at these metrics, right? They are really concerned with people that send a ton of email that doesn't get opened. That just doesn't look right. So the worst thing that can happen is you send, when the emails you send, that it goes straight to the trash. You go to the effort to delete it versus just ignoring it because it's in the third tab over in Gmail. Like that's an act of aggression almost. So you really don't want that. But even more, you don't want that. These are the sorts of things that we really need to pay attention to. These emails have been going to our CTO for something like 12 years. He's never opened an email from them, and they just keep coming. So these are the things that they pay attention to. So engagement and clicks, having something where you have a really clear call to action, you have hopefully a very compelling message. You are giving people a reason to look beyond the first paragraph. It's going to, as obviously if they're clicking, if they're opening, that's good. If they're clicking, that's even better. If they are assigning your emails to a role, they're classifying you or categorizing your emails as something other than spam, that's obviously really good. If they think your emails are super important, that's super good. So, and so then it becomes a question of how do we, in each individual organization, come up with a motivation to somebody to star your email. And not a lot of people are going to do it, of course, but that's sort of, if that's what you have in the back of your mind, I want people to star my emails. I mean, maybe you just ask them, try that first. But it's the emails that are getting marked as spam or getting immediately deleted are obviously ones that an email provider is going to say, this organization sending these emails, it should just all go either to the third or fourth tab over, or it should just all go straight to trash, or not straight to trash, but straight to the junk folder. And the part of the problem with email, one of the parallel challenges here is there's been a real concentration in email providers over time. So these 17 providers account for 83% of the email addresses on a typical list. And these guys are probably 83% of that. And not only that, a lot of these guys also are actually the email provider for a lot of large companies. So these guys really care if your subscribers are engaged. They care because it is a business cost to them. And the reason that they don't want bad email going into the inbox is because it negatively impacts their business and their users. So these are the people that we have to pay attention to and focus on. Now, one of the things that is the reason that the stakes are getting higher and these activities are getting harder is that it's escalating. Now they will actually put a warning if somebody's sending email and it's getting low engagement rates. Now they will flag it and say, these guys seem dodgy. I got an email from somebody that has a table out there in the little courtyard, and I opened it, and I think they're on Gmail. I opened it, and I got a yellow warning, across, where the body of the email was. Are you sure you want to proceed? And this was from their business domain, which is kind of scary. And so I kind of really gently told them something's up. And so that the worse the engagement is, they will escalate on you, and if it's not Spam House, it's the email provider themselves that will say, we're actually going to encourage people not to open your email, and then you're going to get lower engagement rates. People are like, they have a good point. So now this, and I meant to caveat this at the beginning, so I'll caveat it now. I'm sure there are people in the room that know more about email deliverability and know more about domain names that have gone away and all that than I do. I'm more the messenger, since, as I mentioned, our CTO wrote this book. I also am always cognizant of, when presenting, that a lot of the stuff that ends up coming up in presentations you have to cover, but it sort of it's, I'm speaking to people that know a lot of this already, and and it sort of, I don't want this to come across as if you don't know how to improve engagement, but this is what we focus on in engagement. And this should seem intuitive, it should seem like it's stating the obvious, but I think often what happens is the folks in this room are sending email like this, and this might be your plan. On the other hand, it may be that the executive director or some other for the board, if your board gets involved in your emails, I've seen that, they have a different opinion about what a good email should be sent. In my opinion, just send an email with a cat gif and a donate button. Doesn't matter what your org is. Doesn't matter. Okay, maybe not. So the whole point here is that if the focus is here, you're going to get higher engagement, which means you're going to do the reverse of the negative cycle, the downward spiral. You're going to get good engagement rates, which means more of your emails are going to go into the first tab in Gmail, and more people are going to open, and that's going to continue. So, and that's why really tracking things and really testing things like subject lines and images and calls to action, and where you put the links, having one at the top and at the bottom, etc. Really testing those things and tracking the engagement metrics. So if you send out a mailing and you got a pretty high open rate but a shockingly low click-through rate for what you would expect, then pay attention to that so that your next mail, and obviously you can do subject line tests and roll out the better subject line and that sort of thing. All right, so back to our fight in Oxford, England at ECF. Or as our CTO would put it, the con is that, the main con from unsubscribing somebody that hasn't opened your email in 6 months is that the conversion rate for lapsed and inactives is probably non-zero, as in greater than zero. Now, only an engineer I just love that line. It's like the most sort of engineering phrase I've ever seen. It could possibly be greater than zero, but I'm going to use the non-number non-zero. The real thing is we obviously don't want to just like go willy-nilly and unsubscribe things right and left. But so we do need to make sure that we're really getting rid of both the bad, of course, the bad addresses. But really getting rid of the ones that are truly inactive. And if you haven't had any problems with deliverability yet, then it may be that you can start out at say 9 months or 12 months. But it shouldn't be like 90 months. It shouldn't. Bless you. What we use to help prevent getting bad emails is third-party validation. We use fresh address. So anytime a new email address is entered on Tier 2, we can do an immediate call out to say, hey, is this toxic? They will check it for format and everything. But then they also have a database of millions of known bad email addresses that they've identified as bad, and then we'll look it up and make sure that it is. And we don't do anything with that address. And it takes seconds to do this. There's other companies. For a while we were using a company called Xverify, and this goes to point 2 on the con, which is why I'm talking about this a little further. Is because the way that the Yahoo owns and manages a bunch of domains that it's not clear are Yahoo domains that are domains from with just totally different names and are all over the place, and it's really hard for these systems to know what the deal is with a lot of Yahoo managed domain email addresses. So as a result, they were basically telling us when we were first scanning our lists and getting this into place, they were telling us all of your Yahoo addresses, or tens of thousands of them, are bad. You should purge them. But then we would look these addresses up. We took a sample. We looked them up in our system, and and 80% had taken action within the last 30 days. So there was something not right with their system, and so that goes to if you are using a system that's purging addresses, or they're flagging addresses for you, do due diligence before you before you move on that, because you might be, the last thing we want is, in the interest of email deliverability, getting rid of a bunch of donors that actually are opening your emails. So let's not. This always goes a little faster than I expect. So I'm not going to linger over this because I think it's been pretty clearly covered. So then, of course, the next question is growing a clean, highly engaged list. And I think we all know this. I think Graham would agree with this, and everyone else at Engaging Networks. Add only valid email addresses. So that's where that mail checker or any other product similar to that can spot a format flawed email address doesn't get on. Make sure that you're getting consent. We believe in the pre-tick box because we send hundreds of millions of emails a year, 100 million a month or so, and so far so good. So after 22 years of that, we're confident. We don't do a pre-tick box in Europe because you can't anymore, and that's a whole nother story. But make sure that you're getting consent, and this goes to also making sure that they know that you're being clear about what they can expect in terms of the type of communications. So if it's sign up for your bird of the month email list and you're getting a bird of the day, then that might be surprising to people and they might be motivated to unsubscribe. And again, focus on engagement because that's really what they're looking at. So this is just a standard example of a pre-tick box getting consent, which probably looks a lot like everyone else's emails or sign-ups forms. So just to state the obvious, perhaps, so what happens without consent? This can really cause problems. So obviously, fast unsubscribes, a spike in spam complaints, the yellow warning, or the deprioritization of not going into the main inbox, and potentially like legal implications to that as well. The other day we bought a database of 480 million email addresses, not to use, just to see what was actually in there because it was super cheap. So you're like, this has got to be garbage, but we're interested. And we would never on earth, there's no way on earth we would ever use it, but we're like, sorry, apparently it's time for me to get my daughter from the bus at the bus stop.
You're going to be late.
So I got to go. That's a problem. I knew I was forgetting to turn something off. Sorry about that. Yeah, but we're really fascinated, and our CTO found like 11 of his own old email addresses, like from college, etc. So it's really interesting. Don't go buy a giant bucket of leads or a giant email list, and unless you're on your way out and you are really angry. Probably not then either. All right, so I touched on this a little bit, so I won't belabor it, but the image here is intended to suggest that if you are using a double opt-in, it's the equivalent of shredding the people who are trying to get on your list. If somebody goes and takes action on your site and makes a gift, and they sign up for your list with a pre-tick box, and what we do is one of the other things that we do is we'll send a confirmation email saying thanks for signing up, and people can unsubscribe at that point, and that's great, and we will exercise that. So think of it as instead of a double opt-in, it's a double opt-out. And I could really bore you with the description that you could actually say that with Care 2 it's like a 5-step opt-out opportunity, but I won't do that. From our perspective, there's not a huge lift in opt-in versus opt-out. So we've been active under GDPR in Europe now for 5 months. And the conversion rates are about 40% lower in terms of people signing up. And the behavior rates, the sort of actions and donations, are about, this is just like roughly about 20% higher. So you take a 40% hit to get a 20% lift, and I'm not good at math, but I think that's bad. So I'll leave it at that. That's our theory. So these are a series of links that aren't very useful to you because they're tiny, and I can't even read them on my screen. But this is at the point in our conversation where I remind you that in your bag, or if you give me your card, I'll send you a link to the email white paper that this is based on, because it's got a bunch more resources and it's got the links, and you can click on the links in the white paper because it's an ebook and so forth. But these are some really useful resources, and so our CTO, he really should be like we would call him our CEO, but Chief Email Officer, because that is like 90% of what he does, and that's sort of what it takes. So and we have seen and we have heard of organizations getting shut down in Q4 in November, their entire email program getting shut down. Organizations that might raise $30 million a year at year end online getting shut down. So if you rely on donations, and you get a lot of donations at year end via email, then this is why we think this is kind of a big deal. So that's my only mildly impassioned plea for you guys to have amazing email deliverability and not have your email list get crushed. So that's my email address if you want to email me, and I can send you the ebook. You can also give me your card. You can also use the thing that insert from your bag. And you can also, at this point in time, ask any questions that you like. And I promise not to be able to answer all of them, especially the really, really technical ones. But others in the room might be able to. Yes?
I actually have a couple questions.
Oh, dear.
One is, so we're exploring, so we email content and we email emails. We currently, you're either subscribed for all or none. I was just wondering if there's any kind of best practice of, like, if we let people unsubscribe from, say, donation emails, like, because they might still want content-related emails, like, is there any data out there in terms of whether that's effective or not effective, or?
Yeah, I think it's good to have an email preference center, so when they go to unsubscribe, you can give them the option of, well, I want to keep getting the donation asks. I just don't want the content. So I think that there's value in that. I don't have specific data, but it makes sense. But the reverse is, I would argue, isn't true. So there are organizations that will ask people to say, what are you interested in? So to sort of pre-segment them as they come on. And I've seen a lot of organizations struggle with that, because then that thing that they were interested in, the 3 things they selected, you no longer work on. Or what have you, and you're like, so we back in the day, I'm speaking out of school, an organization with a 2 in its name, Care 2, that when we first started out doing this, we created interest lists. So if you signed an environmental petition, you were added to that list, and we would opt in the sign-up language. It would specify, do you want to receive environmental action alerts, or women's rights action alerts, or animal rights action alerts, etc. And so we were stuck with that, and it was a real problem, because we obviously wanted to email everybody on everything when it was the right time for that person to get the email about that topic. And so we obviously did away. I mean, that was a very 1998 approach to email. A lot of organizations did that, and that's a long time ago, 20 years ago. But I still see it sort of come up. It's like, oh, we can't email these people because they only signed up for this. I definitely avoid that sort of self-selecting segmentation approach, because it limits you. But then using your dashboards and engaging network, segment and think, like, this person has never responded to this, so we'll leave them out. And let the machines do the segmenting rather than the humans that are coming to your website, because they're not good segmenters.
So my other question is, when we look at our email analytics, we had this experience definitely before we transitioned to engaging networks, but we still see it a little bit, where our click-throughs on our email reporting is way higher than what we see in our actual site traffic. And based on kind of the timing of that, what our suspicion is that when our emails are going in through, we have a lot of in our audience that have, I don't know, it's email, like some sort of virus scan or something on their network that kind of pings all the links and does all that. Is there any way to kind of how best to sort through that?
To get through the scan? I'm sure there is. I don't know. Anyone else like done anything to try and make sure? I mean, part of it is so I guess on one level you don't need to worry about that discrepancy too much because you're really worrying about trends. So are our open rates steady and improving? Yay. Or is it the opposite? Not yay. So as long as you know that there is a discrepancy, as long as that's happening, you're probably okay. But there may be other reasons where you actually really want to get rid of that confusion, and I'm sure that there's got to be. It seems like there's got to be like an analytics tool out there that can tell you whether it was a machine that hit the link or did it happen before the email was actually opened, sort of thing. But yeah, that's well beyond me. Other questions? Yes?
I was wondering if you could talk about soft bounces. Like, I feel like, some people are like, at 3 soft bounces, the emails, at 5 soft bounces, at 6. Like, what would you recommend for soft bounces?
I would start by sort of getting a handle on the universe. If it's 1% of your list, you might be more aggressive. If it's a lot of your list and they soft bounce, but then some of them stop soft bouncing, then maybe a little less aggressive. We continue to mail to soft bounces until they have not taken action for 6 months, as far as I know. Now that's a rule that we could decide actually it's not worth it because they and again to come up with a number. So and I know that a lot of the way that organizations will approach this is sort of test into it and say, all right, let's start if they bounce, if there's a soft bounce 3 times or whatever, we'll start at 8, and if that really takes care of the most and we think we're not harming our reputation, maybe we're happy with that. And other organizations will just be super aggressive. So it's more how aggressive you want to be, but I think the larger context is also what's your deliverability like now? Have you encountered issues? Is it all good, or do you have to be in a really aggressive sort of triage mode, and then that sort of will help define how aggressive you need to be.
You mentioned similar laws coming to the U.S. as GDPR, privacy law.
Yeah. So
what do you know about that?
not enough. Except I don't like it. That's what I know. I don't like it. But so California just passed a law that on data privacy. It doesn't speak to consent, and it doesn't come into effect for like 2 years. But so start looking at it now. But it doesn't. So it doesn't speak to whether you need to have an active opt-in versus an opt-out. But it's more focused on how you really data privacy in terms of like keeping people's data private and collecting their data in when you have a reasonable reason to do so. So it's more sort of focused on how the data is handled. And Vermont is actually looking at GDPR, and if Vermont goes to GDPR, I think everybody's just going to be like, well, we're done with Vermont because like, come on. I mean, there were companies. There are a lot of U.S. companies that just didn't adapt to GDPR. It's like, okay, bye Europe. So if they're going to do that to Europe, I mean, Vermont doesn't stand a chance. Now there was also an article in the Post last week. What's today? It may have been Sunday or Monday, or it was last week. But talking about conversations at the national level in the U.S. around the need for a national privacy law because of the California law. And it's actually a lot of the big data people like Google and Facebook are sort of getting involved in that to try and make sure that whatever happens is useless and doesn't affect their business. And is completely declawed and defamed. So there's stuff sort of percolating and some stuff that has just come through. And I think the any organization, so organizations that have had to adapt to GDPR, nothing is going to be more stringent in terms of sort of the data protections than in the states or in any individual state than what GDPR is. So if you've had to deal with that, you're probably in good shape, especially in terms of how you keep and store and share data. And they're really concerned about If Care 2 sends data over to fresh address and back, is it hashed? Is it secure? All of that, so that you don't have a data breach where suddenly we've dumped 100 million email addresses into the wind, and now somebody's buying the database for $45. So, is that helpful? Ish. Luckily, nothing GDPR-like is on imminent, but it's it's a big Cambridge Analytica. It's kind of a big deal. Anyone else? Yes.
Can you explain the spam trap concept a little more? Like, how does that work, and who's trapping?
Who's trapping who?
Yeah,
I feel like that isn't. I thought it was who's zooming who, but.
That too.
So the email providers and outfits like Spamhaus are the ones doing it because they're trying to identify malicious emailers. So picture the Nigerian prince. Any email you get that says "Dear sweetest" or "Dearest friend," it's like, I'm like, you're still like 35 years and you're still using "Dearest" as a salutation. Come on. So they're trying to identify real spammers, like malicious, aggressive, bad guy spammers that are data mining, finding a bunch of addresses, and just hammering people. They're not trying to catch out nonprofits that are trying to save the world, but they're okay if they catch you out because they think not spamming is also saving the world.
Is there something that Care 2 is doing? Do Care 2 emails get caught in Gmail promotion? And is there anything you all are doing specifically to get out of promotion?
It depends on the person, but yeah. I mean, if somebody, my Care 2 action alerts might go into promotion and yours might not, or vice versa, because it depends on how we individually engage with the Care 2 emails. Which isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is like, how do you get people to shift you from promotion to that main tab? And how do you even do that? I don't know how to do that. So, but sadly, I don't know if that's something that we're focused on right now. Like from our, I think we're really mostly focused on making sure that that our reputations are in the green and that we're at 90+ deliverability. But I don't know off the top of my head if our CTO has looked into that sort of next layer. But I agree. There was a discussion on Progressive Exchange a couple weeks ago where somebody was asking about this very question, and the responses were not super helpful. The responses were sort of like, well, as long as you're not going into the spam folder, hooray. And I'm like, no.
Nobody's reading that promotion.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's helpful. I mean, that's also, to your point about it's how people interact. It might be how people want to get their email. Like, I prefer with Gmail having things organized that way so that I know where things are, similar to foldering. So it's useful.
Right. There's sort of AI foldering for you, and you can be like, I'm interested in checking up on my promotions. I'll go over here, but it's not interrupting with the email I'm getting from ads.
Like, I want to know what my parents are sending to me.
You just never get into the promotions tab. But if you go to the promotions tab, you want to send them good enough stuff that they're remembered and like they're incentivized to check the promotions tab.
Yeah, we've had an interesting experience with Gmail where we have various staff who use our personal Gmails to just see how our emails are being received, and it'll be all over the map. And there'll be one email where one week it's going into the spam folder where you have to go find it, and other times it's in promotions, and sometimes it's in inboxes, and we kind of can't find a rhyme or reason for where it's kind of how it's all ending up.
Yeah, it's a good question. But a small number of people doing the right thing. This sounds like this is a politically inspiring statement. It's not. But seriously, our CTO has said, guys, go check your folders and get your alerts into the main folder.
Right.
It doesn't take a lot of people sending a signal that to shift things. At least that's our CTO's theory. So, and similarly with being shut down, it's not that 1% of your list has to be bad or 0.01%. It can be like 4 or 5 spam complaints in a very condensed period of time, that can cause problems. So it's the raw number, and the raw number is small. So yeah, I'm curious about that. So I'll ask internally and see what we're doing.
That'd be great.
Besides telling all of our staff to give me a look, because that's,
That'd be great.
I mean, it can't do any harm. What else? Awesome. Well, thank you for making it here, the last session of the conference, and hopefully this was helpful and you got some tidbits, and I'm happy to send you the ebook if you give me a means by which to do that. Thanks very much.